Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. A farmer drip under pressure, or a guy more than 25 miles away from home with a briefcase. Those are my two favorite definitions of expert. And experts are one of the key features today in litigation. You need experts to prove certain things. You need an expert to prove that somebody's claim in an advertisement was deceptive. You need an expert in a medical negligence case to say that a doctor was negligent. You need an expert in a product liability case to say there was an alternative, safer design for this product. Experts are very important, and they provide, I think, a lot of very interesting testimony in the course of any given trial. And experts have all kinds of problems that go along with them, all kinds of issues that pop up. You may recall recently I did a video on the Daubert hearings and how this particular case, Daubert versus Merrill Dow, affects the use of expert testimony. Well, today we're going to take a look at Rule 702 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, which has been more or less adopted by pretty much every state at this point. And we're going to look at how an expert gets to be qualified. That sort of brings up the question. Would someone who works on tires all day long, putting new tires on cars or changing tires, would that person be an expert in a vehicle rollover case, for example, or a tire failure case? Well, possibly. So let's take a look at the rule regarding expert witnesses. This is Rule 702 of the Federal Rules of Evidence. And the Federal Rules of Evidence lay down some basic premises about what evidence is admissible, what evidence is inadmissible, and how you go about determining which is which. Rule 702 says a witness who is qualified as an expert by knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education may testify in the form of an opinion or otherwise if the expert's scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge will help the trier of fact to understand the evidence or to determine a fact in issue. That's important because that's the first thing that needs to be determined. Is an expert even needed? If an expert's needed, then the expert's testimony has to be helpful. Also, the testimony has to be based on sufficient facts or data. Now, that can be data that is supplied by counsel. It can be data learned in an independent investigation. It can be facts that an expert would routinely rely on. For example, tables of coefficients of friction, that sort of thing. All of those kinds of things, sufficient facts or data have to underlie the actual opinion. The testimony is the product of reliable principles and methods, meaning if you are going to be presenting information that deals with testing or with science, that the science that you present has to be the process of has to be reliable, and it has to be reproducible, and the methods have to coincide with science generally. And that's what D is. Rule 702 is effectively the Bible when it comes to determining whether or not an expert is qualified. You start with Rule 702 and then you move to Daubert. This brings us back to my question. Could somebody who simply changed tires, worked in a tire shop all day long, and put on tires, took off tires, he saw the results of poor alignment of tires, and he saw the results of overinflated tires, underinflated tires. He saw what happens in different situations to tires. And in looking at a tire, he could tell you what happened to it. By virtue of his knowledge about tires, his skill in putting on and taking off tires, and his training in understanding how tires are made and developed, he may very well be qualified as an expert in a case. And for that reason, he may be able to testify. In other words, you don't have to have a PhD from Harvard to be an expert witness. Sometimes you don't even have to have a bachelor's degree. For example, if a question arose in a case involving somebody who got stung by bees, you could call a beekeeper. Even if they didn't have a degree, you could call a beekeeper as an expert witness, and that would be perfectly allowable. Now, obviously, the more qualified an expert is, the more believable an expert is. But generally, if an expert meets the tests set out in Rule 702, that's all he has to do. Everything else goes to the weight of his testimony. Let's assume you've got two beekeepers. One beekeeper studied bees at Auburn University, has an undergraduate in biology and zoology, and as a result of that, he had that double major. He certainly spent a lot of time learning about bees. He then went on to get a master's degree in pollination studies, or whatever else they offer master's degrees in, and he got that from MIT, or Texas A&M, some other well-known university. Is he more qualified than a guy who's got 10 boxes of bees sitting in his back pasture? On paper, yes. But in terms of who makes the better expert, it actually has a lot more to do with their demeanor and their ability to convey information in front of a jury. There was a remake of John Wayne's movie, True Grit, several years ago. And one of the things that I thought was really great about that was there was a courtroom scene in it where the marshal is being investigated and because of a shooting that he engaged in with somebody who was apparently a bad guy. And he just continually cracks the jury up with his responses to the stupid questions from the lawyer. And a lot of times, that's all that has to happen in a case is you get a lawyer who doesn't ask good questions or who on cross-examination doesn't understand that he's dealing with somebody who knows a lot more about bees than you do, and pretty quickly you wind up making your case look a lot worse than it did before. So experts are key. They make a huge difference in how well a case comes in front of the jury. And I think it's important to note that almost anybody could be an expert. I could certainly be an expert on legal ethics. I've published on it, I've written on it, and in addition to all of that, I teach on it pretty much 2 or 3 times every year. That's important. I could be an expert in that topic. I probably could not be an expert on respiratory care at this point, because although I was a respiratory therapist and will be one until the day I die, I have not practiced in 20 years, 30 years maybe now, and as a result, I don't have the current knowledge base and current skill set to be able to opine appropriately on things like standard of care. A court might certify me as an expert based on my skill, knowledge, training, and experience, but that doesn't mean that I would be the best person to represent someone as an expert witness in court, again, simply because that's not the job that I do now. When a lawyer goes out to get an expert, good lawyers go out to universities and they try to find people who are school trained, who have good degrees, and who will make a good impression in front of the jury. Doesn't always happen, but that's what you look for. And there are, in many cases, particularly in smaller counties, smaller trials, where you will get somebody who comes in and they're, a farmer or they're a mechanic, and they're somebody who can testify at length about welding. Not because they're certified as a welder, but because they weld all the time to keep their equipment running. It's important to realize that it's a rule of reason and that courts have a great deal of flexibility in allowing an expert to testify on certain subjects. So that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, things we always ask you to do. Particularly if this is your first time watching. We do a lot of fun stuff on this channel. I like to think. I would like to think I'm a lawyer who's not too full of himself, even though when I stand on the scale, it indicates that I'm a little too full of some things. Anyway, if you would, I'd appreciate your subscription. It helps a great deal with the algorithm, as do your comments. And I have some of the best commenters in the entire world out there. And I want to thank you guys too. Every morning, my wife gets ready to go off to work. She works at her daughter's medical office. And I pack her lunch. Usually I pack her a salad because that's what she wants. But I always put a little something extra in there. Today I put in some pumpkin loaf that I got at Publix. And it's just a little I love you to let her know that she's the light of my life. 23 years into marriage, she's still the light of my life, and that I love her. It is a really kind thing to do to remind people that you love on a daily basis how much you love them. Have a terrific day. Catch me down here at the beach next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.